So you're not the first former teacher that I've interviewed on this podcast, and I doubt that you will be the last, but every story is unique. So I want to ask you, making the leap to starting your own digital marketing agency, what made you do it?
So it wasn't a direct jump from classroom to agency. So I taught way before we had our girls, and I was doing a master's at the same time. Which seemed really like a great idea on paper. To be fair, I had a lot more time than now. But Cambridge said, "Oh, you can do it alongside your teaching," and I'm sure a lot of people did. But I struggled to teach basically full time and do this masters, and it was this lovely funding loophole where I'd had to self fund, and my nana had left me some money before she passed, so it went straight on that, and I couldn't afford to not pass basically. So I left the classroom because I was like, I get one chance to do this MEd, and expected I'd be going back once I got my MEd, but I then worked full time, but it's nothing like a classroom full time, at a university near us in recruitment, and it sort of bordered on marketing, so recruiting students, that is, not staff. So it gave me a taste of marketing. I really enjoyed it. I went and did outreach in schools. I was a widening participation officer. So my role was to go out and speak to children, young people that are at risk of not achieving their goals, essentially. So I would go out and inspire them, talk about HG. Loved it. And realized actually I get a lunch break and I can I was like, I vividly remember speaking to my manager Louise and saying, "Do you mind if I just nip to the loo?" And she looked at me like I was an absolute psychopath. She was like, "What do you mean?" I was like, I just really need the toilet. Do you mind if I just pop off?" And she was like, "What? Why are you telling me?" And I was like, "Well, that's what you do, don't you?" And she was like, "No, Emily, no." You don't need to ask permission to go to the toilet. But that was my experience. I'd gone straight from university into teaching. And I remember asking if I could go off site for my lunch break. And again, people were looking at me like I was an alien. They were like, "Why wouldn't you be allowed to go off site on your lunch break?" And I was like, "I don't know." So I got an experience of that, and I loved marketing. I loved working with schools, just it wasn't in front of the children anymore directly. And I got a real taste for it and kind of carried on that. I did some youth work as well. I worked for a charity for a while. Again, it was all going into schools. And then it was sometime during like COVID, I was pregnant with Grace. It's all a blur, but I started freelancing doing it. Always with that education background, because I was finding even in those roles, people had been really interested in the fact that I was a previous teacher. That kind of added a level of understanding, especially if I was going into schools and talking to a bunch of year 10s that weren't really that interested in what I had to say. If I could say to the teacher, like, "Oh, don't worry, like I've sat in front of a crowd like this before, it doesn't scare me." People liked that. And so I started freelancing, and just working directly with like small, mostly retail brands in the education space to start with, but it grew and grew and grew.